Today I'm interviewing Barry Neufeld because he has been fined $750,000 by the Human Rights Tribunal for speech deemed offensive towards trans people. And so we're here to talk to him about this. Barry, thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it.
So why don't we start off with, could you explain to my audience what has happened over the last few years? Just give us an overview of your case.
Well, it was the summer of 2017 when I first learned that as an elected school trustee, they had been piloting a new sex ed program called SOGI 123. I'd never heard of it before. And I went to a parent information meeting and I discovered they were going to roll it out K-12 in 3 weeks. Now, I'd been on the school board for many years. I'd never heard of it. And there was all this talk about gender is fluid. You could be a boy or a girl or somewhere in between. And I thought, this is crazy. That was the end of August. I did a lot of research throughout September and October. And finally in October, I made a comment on Facebook that I said, transitioning children is child abuse. Well, I was even surprised how the media went crazy on me. My school board was embarrassed because they didn't even know it was being implemented. The superintendent knew, and one other colleague on the school board knew. A couple of months later, an activist lawyer approached the support workers union and asked them if they'd like to make $50,000. And there was a proposal by the Human Rights Tribunal that we resolve this in a restorative justice manner. And my lawyers piped up and they said, yeah, give us names. Tell us who was harmed. Oh, no, we can't give you names. Then they decided that they couldn't accuse me of creating a toxic work environment because an elected trustee doesn't go into classrooms and talk to teachers and criticize the way they dress or how they teach. We sit in a boardroom and we make policy and vote on it. And once the policy is agreed upon, we give the policy to the superintendent. Then he implements it. So they changed their complaint to simply hate speech. They want you to make a public apology. They want you to promise to never run for public office again. They want you to take a training program so you understand what transgender is all about. And they want you to donate $50,000 to a LGBTQ charity. Well, I thought about it. And for 6 years, I had taken the position that teaching children they can change genders was a harmful thing. It was confusing them. Didn't make their life quality any better. I got back to the lawyers and I said, sorry, I can't back down. I can't apologize. I'm not accepting the deal. And within days, the insurance company got back to me and they had cut off all my legal representation. We finally got through the hearings. There were 3 weeks of hearings. That's longer than some murder trials. So obviously the tribunal figures that this is very important. It was not a pleasant experience because they were condescending. They kept referring to me as a hateful person. I have never said anything hateful to anybody that I know of. I've been hard on a program. I've been hard on philosophy. I've been hard on ideology, but not people. My concern has always been the safety of children and making sure they're not confused. So anyways, now I'm facing a $750,000 penalty.
So to provide greater clarity for listeners, the tribunal found 30 of your publications, they called it, from Facebook, comments made at a public event, in statements made during a board meeting, a school board meeting, and a widely circulated email. And they found that 24 were discriminatory and 6 crossed into hate speech.
I've had numerous death threats. I've had people drive by in the car and tell me to go F myself. Why don't you kill yourself and I'll help you if I want. That is hate. I have never demonstrated that kind of hate. Section 7 of the BC Human Rights Code can be selectively used, and I did see there was a petition once to remove Section 7 out of the BC Human Rights Code because the ruling authorities can use that as a weapon against people who oppose the government. But if you are in the minority and you don't have power, there's no way Section 7 can help you to go after powerful people who are bullying you. So it's kind of a one-way street. Nobody is going to have the nerve to dissent from any government mandate.
Yeah.
I devoted almost 30 years of my life to public education. I was very involved before I was elected as a school trustee, and I was a school trustee for 27 years. The whole public education system is not responsive to the voters anymore. It toes the line of directives from Victoria. And unfortunately, the Minister of Education is totally beholden to the BC Teachers Federation because they're such a powerful voting bloc that they can vote them in and hold their feet to the fire. That's not democracy. I've been watching this control of public education get stronger and stronger and stronger since 1988 up until today. I had no intention to hurt anybody's feelings. And if I say that there's only two genders, there's a man, there's male, there's female, that's just the truth as I see that. And if that hurts somebody's feelings, I can't help it. But I'm not going to change that because I don't believe there's more than two genders. And they call that existential denialism. I deny the existence of non-binary and all the other genders there are. And I told them to their face, I said, no, I don't deny their existence. I just think they're deluded. Well, that's hate speech. So here I am.
I would like to just take a pause and just say that even if people disagree with what you said, they should still defend your right to be able to say it.
I'm willing to debate anybody, and that's what I kept saying. We need to just talk about this some more. Oh no, don't talk about it because that's hateful to even question it. When I was a kid in high school, we used to have debating teams.
Yeah.
They don't happen anymore because you might say something that would hurt somebody's feelings. I've had phone calls from much younger school trustees that are terrified. They could lose their home. They could lose everything that they work for in their life just by saying the wrong thing. I must admit that I was pretty outspoken, and my concern all along was not to hurt the feelings of any adult transgender people. And I said very, very little that a gay person could find offensive, but I was very vocal in saying that children do not need to be dragged into this. Because I was so outspoken, it was easy for them to classify it as hatred or discrimination or defamation. And that was not my intention. I just I wanted an amendment. I wanted SOGI 123 to be revisited. But one union president said it's perfect just the way it is.
Why did it not go to the courts? Why has it gone to this ideological body that is abusing their powers, clearly?
Well, with the court, there's one act. You lay a complaint of defamation or whatever, and they deal with it. With this human rights, they just kept adding more. They kept watching. They kept building up this binder of nasty things that I said, and courts don't do that. If there's somebody insults you the second time, well, then there has to be another charge. And the Human Rights Tribunal, they were just feeding on this. They thought we can really make an example of this man. They know that they'll never get that money out of me because I just don't have it. But they think that by laying a $750,000 fine on me, that they will stop everybody else in the province from saying anything that might offend a transgender person. And it's really stifled debate. I mean, I have the greatest sympathy for people who are not happy in their bodies, and I wish there were more ways we could help them. But I think that the help that they're getting right now is not sufficient, but they don't wanna hear my opinion. They don't wanna hear anything. They think what we're doing right now is perfect, and it's not. I don't believe it is. Um, so that's the difference between the courts and the tribunals. The, um,
Mhm.
the tribunal has 3 members on it. They're all activist lawyers. They've been involved in, environmental law, Aboriginal law, immigration law. They're not judges. Um, I was an officer of the court for 27 years. As a probation officer, I was regularly in court. Courts have rules. There's certain things you can and say and you can't say. There were no rules in that human rights tribunal. They violated my charter rights over and over again because they were determined to prove their point that this was a hateful person and we got to nail him.
Now let's get into the specifics of what you said, and this I think is less important to the discussion of free speech, but it still is important because people are talking about this a lot, and it really divides people and stirs up a lot of emotion about how to deal with gender dysphoria and radical gender ideology, and particularly in relation to the classroom and where schools are taught, or where kids are taught rather. And first off, I want to say, or I want to ask you, do you do you feel that a lot of the people opposing you, or a lot of people who advocate for gender affirming care for, for kids to receive puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones, do you believe that they have good intentions, that they want to help kids? Oftentimes, do you concede that?
Yes, they think that this is a new way of helping kids and they think that this will prevent suicide. But in 2008, iPhones came out, and within a year or two, nearly every teenager had access to an iPhone, and they were getting inundated with this new idea that you can find more peace and happiness if you change your gender, and that maybe you're born into the wrong body. Like Abigail Schreier points out, this became a social contagion among kids, but it was practically unheard of before 2008.
And okay, so you're conceding that proponents of gender affirming care and radical gender ideology, they want to help.
They think they're helping,
They
yes.
they think they're helping.
Yeah.
Do you also acknowledge that gay kids, trans kids, or even as adults can face animus or discrimination? Or, I mean, I've heard of lots of stories of young gay kids who are being picked on for being gay by other students. Do you oppose that, and do you acknowledge that does happen?
I do acknowledge that happens, and, um, when SOGI 123 was rolled out, it was sold as an anti-bullying program, and that this would prevent, gay kids from being bullied. It really has very little to do with gay kids. Actually, the whole transgender movement has, is different than the gay rights movement, but they've
Yep.
tried to enmesh it.
The research by Ken Zucker shows that upwards of 80% of kids who have gender dysphoria end up outgrowing gender dysphoria by the
Yeah.
time they finish puberty, and most of them end up as being gay or lesbian kids. And so, 20, 30 years ago, if you had a more feminine boy who likes art and fashion and makeup, you might have feelings that he might be of the opposite sex, but by the time he would finish puberty, he would just very likely end up being a gay boy, being same-sex attracted.
Mhm.
And same with girls who might be more masculine in their personality and be interested in combat sports,
Mhm.
or superhero films, etc. A lot of them, the vast majority of them, end up just being lesbian by the time they grow out of puberty. But gender affirming care now comes along and says that if you're a more feminine boy or a more masculine girl, oh, it's because you're born in the wrong body, and then
Yeah.
here's some puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, when they were very likely just going to end up being gay or lesbian.
Well, what about the lived experience of the witnesses that I had? The two lesbians that were going to testify on my behalf, their grandmothers, they've been together for 37 years. And they believe that children should be left alone to explore their sexuality without being manipulated by adults. That it's up to the parents to guide their children in these areas, and that's true in other cultures. The two transgender women were detransitioners. They have horrendous stories to tell of the pain that they went through and how they got rushed into medically altering their bodies. And then they grew up and discovered that, they'll never be able to have a family. They'll never be able to nurse a baby. And they'll never quit growing a beard. One of them, she grew a beard and went bald on the top of her head. So
Yeah.
got a double problem. I sympathize for them. And there's this threat. And Dr. Zucker points out that suicidality is different than completed suicide. If a kid wants to transition, they said, if you prevent them that they're going to commit suicide, that's not true. A lot of them will manipulate by threatening suicide, but very few of them actually do. Once they do transition, once a person has completely transitioned, their likelihood of suicide is 9 times greater than the general population. That's why I have been so desperate and sometimes been outspoken in trying to stop this ideology from infecting our schools in as grades as low as
Yeah.
kindergarten.
Yeah, this is one of the most pervasive myths in this debate is that you should support socially transitioning kids because it lowers suicide rates, but there's no research. And there are reasons, in case people are confused, there are legitimate reasons to be cautious about invasive biological interventions done at a young age or even in adolescence. Research shows that puberty blockers, they can have a harmful impact on bone density, on one's hormonal profile. I mean, adolescence and puberty is a very powerful process that occurs in our biological development. And
Mhm.
tinkering with it, messing with it, you have to be very careful with what you're doing at that time because it is such a crucial developmental process in the maturation of children. There are links between using puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones to infertility or other reproductive issues, hormonal issues, etc.
Brittle bones.
You want to be very, very careful about using such an invasive biological intervention at a young age when kids, we don't allow kids to get tattoos. We don't allow them to legally, drink or consume all kinds of drugs and, drive a car. Similarly, when kids are in such a fragile state and they're figuring out who they are and they might have questions or anxieties, which, neither of us deny that, right? That it can be a very difficult experience, feeling like you were born in the wrong body, or you might be same-sex attracted as a child and you're confused. Which I also wanted to just, clarify on your end. Like you said, you acknowledge that, gay or gender dysphoric kids can be bullied. I'm assuming you oppose any bullying or discrimination of gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans kids.
Certainly, and like I said, we had a really good anti-bullying program before SOGI came out. It was called Erase. When it first came out, our board was visited by Matt Carruthers. He was one of the authors of SOGI 123. He was the only member of public education who was on the steering committee, which was mostly activists from UBC and the Art Foundation. And he said that SOGI 123 is not really an anti-bullying program. It's just consciousness raising. So everybody will understand what it's like for someone who feels like they're born in the wrong body. We still use anti-bullying programs, and like Erase is still available, and it's there. It does the trip. I was on the chair of the policy committee in our school district, and we had discussed our code of conduct. What should we put as protected bounds, and we just had a blanket policy that all bullying, no matter what the reason, was wrong and must be condemned. Well, the Ministry of Education, after they changed the BC Human Rights Code, made a directive that we specifically add same-sex attraction and gender identification to our district school code of conduct and every school's code of conduct. I, not realizing what can of worms this would open, we went along with it. We added it and made those specific categories in there. To read the results of the decision in my case, it would seem like discrimination against transgender is the worst possible sin that you could possibly ever commit. And they are the top priority of people that we must not offend. You know, if you're being bullied for color of your skin or type of hobbies you like or type of music you like, that doesn't matter. And yet, I think it was better in the old days when we said that all bullying was wrong for no matter what reason. We don't need to pick out a certain group of victims and make them more important.
Let's go over some of the statements that the Human Rights Tribunal took issue with. One of your statements was allowing little children to choose to change gender is nothing short of child abuse. And do you feel like that statement might be construed as hyperbolic or inflammatory? Like, we already conceded that the people who are advocating for gender affirming care, their heart is often in the right place and they want to help.
They mean well, but young children do not understand sexuality and the difference between man and woman, and they are way too young to make this decision. It's a decision that should be left until adulthood. And I know of a doctor in the gender affirming care profession in BC that claims that children as young as 3 know. And I'm sorry, doctor, but I don't buy that.
Another way to ask what I'm saying, because a few times you called gender affirming care child abuse, and the Human Rights Tribunal took issue with that. Would you agree that a lot of proponents, not all, but a lot of proponents of gender affirming care are not consciously promoting any form of child abuse? Like, they don't want to abuse children. They want to help children, right?
No,
Even if the effects are different.
they think that this will benefit the child.
Right.
And even Ken Zucker has had patients that he has approved of a transition, but very, very few. I think what people are doing now is they're rushing kids into this decision. And anytime a decision is rushed, that's abuse. When you're not carefully considering all the aspects and all the unintended side effects. I know they don't like to hear me say it, but they need to be more cautious, and hopefully my voice will make some of them more cautious.
You talk about, so one of the statements they took issue with is you said SOGI is evil ideology, gender theory is biologically absurd. Why do you take such issue with SOGI? Why do you think it's evil?
Well, when I first heard about it, as a probation officer, I specialized in supervising sex offenders, and these were quite often men who had abused children. And they often use this line that maybe you're not a boy, maybe you're a girl, why don't we find out? And they would use all this gender confusion to break down the children's boundaries and make them more compliant. It sounded too similar to me, and my training in the best interest of the child was that getting kids to question their whether they're male or female is not helpful to them. It's confusing them, and anytime you confuse a child, that's grooming. To me, that's evil.
One thing I'll say about this whole debate around gender and gender identity is that, in my mind, a lot of this is semantics, actually, and could be simplified. Like, I think it's important, as many people point out, to affirm that there are two genders, man and woman, but you can identify as however you want in those biological constraints. You can be a more feminine male or a more masculine woman, and everyone, this is more like a psychological or even kind of spiritual perspective, everyone has masculine and feminine dimensions. No one is 100% masculine or 100% feminine. We carry these pieces within us. Anyone who's done psychedelic work knows you kind of work with these things or in therapy. And so in my mind, we can still have man and woman, but you can identify as whatever, you want in terms of your personality, your interests, your psychological traits, etc. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, our gender identity. Girls can be tomboys and boys can be sissies, but that doesn't mean that they should be subjected to medical intervention. One of the first people I met in my struggle was a young female lawyer who said that when I was a kid, I was a tomboy. And she says, I'm glad those teachers weren't around back then. She's quite happy with her womanhood now that she's in almost middle-aged.
Mm. Do you think trans adults should be able to get biomedical interventions, and do you think we should respect their pronouns? What's your stance on that?
If a person is an adult, I have no issue with how they want to live their life. That's entirely up to them.
Mhm.
And I would be uncomfortable, but to be polite, I would use their pronouns.
You would.
Yeah. But
Mm.
if they start pushing their beliefs on impressionable children, no, stay out of it. Issues as intimate as gender identity is something that should be left to the parents. And schools have entirely tried to usurp the authority of parents in this area. And there's been numerous cases of a child that has transitioned at school and the parents knew nothing about it.
Mhm.
And that's wrong.
So you're perfectly fine respecting the pronouns and gender identity of a trans adult. You have a problem with young kids experiencing mental health issues and gender dysphoria being pushed in a certain direction by teachers informed by gender ideology and being persuaded that they might be born in the wrong gender. You take issue with impressionable young kids who are in schools who are trying to figure out who they are. You don't take issue with trans adults who want to live their life
No.
and follow their dreams and hopes.
I'm forgetting the law number now. Is it C7 where bans conversion therapy? That was very, very poorly worded. And sure, we don't want people taking gay kids out in the woods and beating them with sticks and giving them shocks, but that was never happening anyway. But also in
It's Bill C6, by the way.
six,
FYI. Yeah.
yeah, I was one digit out.
Yeah. Close enough.
But also with that bill, if a kid is questioning their gender identity, you're not supposed to try and persuade them one way or another, because that would be conversion therapy. And what it's done to the therapeutic community, they're scared to do anything now. They're scared because a child might have oppositional defiant disorder. That needs working on, but the therapist will just go along with their wanting to change their body. In 2018, I was accused of being an old fuddy-duddy, and I was uninformed on what was the latest research in child psychology. So I found out about the World Congress of Adolescent Psychiatrists and Related Professions, and it was being held in Prague, Czech Republic. So I applied to join, to attend, and that was because as a probation officer, I often collaborated with psychiatrists on assessments for the court. So I was told I was welcome to come, so off I went. It was 6 days long. There was over 1,500 delegates from all over the world. And I took every LGBTQ course that I could and everything I could find out about the transgender stuff. The one thing the theme of the conference that struck me was how discouraged and disappointed these child psychiatrists and child and youth psychiatrists were, because I knew The kids hate going to a shrink. They don't like having to talk to somebody about their problems. They will skip appointments. They won't do their homework. And usually if they got psychiatric problems, they got some problem parents too, and the parents won't help and they won't cooperate. But then I'd go to these workshops about gender dysphoria. And I remember this one old psychiatrist from San Francisco, he says, "My patients just love coming to see me. They can't wait to see me. And I'm learning so much from them." I thought, what? Who's running the show here? The patients or the, and well, of course, he was making a lot of money and he was having cooperative clients, which most child psychiatrists don't have. There was protests outside the building of that psychiatrists were drug pushers, that all they did was give kids pills. And they addressed that, and they admitted that, they were depending too much on pharmacotherapy, but they were saying that talk therapy doesn't work with these kids because they never show up. The plenary theme was that the state of the art in treating adolescents was to add a radioactive dye to their blood and then do blood mapping of where all these dyes went. And I thought, wow, that's pretty far out. But like I said, the only therapist there, and we asked them, well, what's the side effects of giving the kids these puberty blockers? Well, we don't really know. Nowadays, here we are, 8 years later, most European countries have backed off on doing all this. Finland was the first, and then Sweden, France. Holland was really pushing this. They've stopped. England has banned it. And even today, like England put severe restrictions on puberty blockers, but today they outright banned them, even for experimental tests.
Yeah, like they've banned it for gender dysphoric kids.
And we're still pushing it here in Canada, especially in BC.
Yeah, and one of the claims that you've made, which have been viewed as very inflammatory and provocative, is that kids with gender dysphoria experience a variety of mental health issues. And did some research into this, and you are correct about that. Kids with gender dysphoria are 5 times more likely to suffer from depression, 6 times more likely, approximately, to suffer from anxiety disorder, 10 times more likely to have autism, 2 to 3 times likely to be diagnosed with ADHD, which that's a whole other debate, but that's kind of complicated. Up to 6 times higher incidence of having obsessive compulsive disorder. And what I'm about to say is very provocative, but it really shouldn't be. The mental illness, which gender dysphoria is considered a mental illness by mainstream psychologists and psychiatrists. The controversies over how you treat it, but it's known that if you go to therapy, an ideal therapist is supposed to challenge your preconceived notions and your irrational beliefs about self and others. I've gone to therapy and have experienced this, that having struggled with things like anxiety, oftentimes we have these irrational beliefs about what's going to happen in the future that don't match with reality. And a good therapist is supposed to gently probe into why you feel like this worst case scenario might happen, or why you feel like everyone hates you, or all these people dislike you, and where that comes from. And then you go into your childhood and explore various traumas. All that is considered very mainstream, and it is advocated and popularized by people who support therapy. Yet when it comes to gender dysphoria, for some reason there's this odd inability to talk about how we can therapeutically explore why a child or a teenager might be feeling that they're born in the wrong body, or they might, a young girl might feel like she's a boy. Why are we so quick now to affirm, in this loving, compassionate language? It's about affirming rather than actually gently probing. You can still be a girl and be interested in combat sports or more aggressive masculine activities. It doesn't mean that it's you're a boy. You can still be a girl and express yourself in these ways without taking invasive puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, surgical procedures, etc.
Well, this ban on conversion therapy is what complicates it for the therapist, because They're afraid to explore any other psychiatric or psychological issues that the kid may have.
Yeah.
They're just supposed to affirm their that they're born in the wrong body, and the kid says, "Well, give me my puberty blockers. Give me my puberty blockers." And a psychiatrist cannot say, "Well, hold it just a minute. Maybe you got a problem over here. We got to deal with it." No, 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 no. You give me my puberty blockers. Until we change the wording of that bill, it's going to be a problem for all therapists.
Do you think gay couples should be able to openly, show that they're gay, go on dates, and have the full rights that straight couples do?
They're adults. Yes, I don't object to that.
Okay.
Um,
I'm asking because a lot of people think of you as homophobic, so I just want to give you the
there wasn't much talk of that because I have said very little that's homophobic. I was on the phone to an elderly lesbian woman in the Netherlands, and she was considering whether to be an intervener in my case. And she scolded me for quoting the American College of Pediatrics. Well, they were the ones that first really clearly explained to me what this gender dysphoria was. But that college was formed because they were a group of pediatricians that were opposed to gay couples adopting children. I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned about what happens to kids when they're told they're born in the wrong body. The only thing that I said publicly that got me into trouble, and I don't back down, I believe that a child has a right to know both their mom and their dad.
Mhm.
So if two lesbians are raising a child, that child should be able to have a relationship with their biological father. If two gay men are raising a kid, that child has a right to relationship with a mother. Now, increasingly, gay couples are using in vitro fertilization, and that certainly complicates it. I was adopted myself, and I spent years and finally succeeded in tracking down both my biological parents, and it was really worthwhile to me. Some adopted kids, they could care less. But for me, it was important. I would hope that no two parents would prevent a child from knowing their other birth parent.
Mm.
That's my only condition on gay people raising children.
Do you oppose gay couples being able to adopt kids?
If they're doing it for the right reasons, I commend. Gay people have developed a reputation of being willing to adopt very, very special needs children that other parents don't want to have. I commend gay people for being willing to take that responsibility.
Can you a couple things before we go? Can you just put a finer point on SOGI and why you feel it's problematic? This particular policies in that.
Well, the whole planning of it excluded various sections of the community. There was no parent representative. There was hardly any medical input. And it was designed behind closed doors. There wasn't an open way of planning for it. And it's completely goes into the radical gender ideology. If anybody does criticize it, they get called a hater. And like I said, one union president said that SOGI is perfect just the way it is. No, it isn't. There's no learning resource or curriculum that's perfect. They all could use some fine tuning and improvement.
And then one of your statements, which was pointed out by the Human Rights Tribunal, was that you said that people, transgender people, you likened them to sex offenders in saying that I was born this way. Now, the parallel you're drawing, the reason why people took issue with that is they felt that you were saying, like, just like sex offenders, we view them in a morally negative way who are doing something wrong. Are you equating a sex offender to a trans person?
No, sex offenders use the excuse that I was born this way. No, they weren't. They were not born that way. They developed an inappropriate attraction because of various events in their life. Maybe it was trauma. Maybe they were abused themselves. but they were not born a sex offender. And I also believe that nobody is born trans. I'll go along with Billboard Chris and say there really are no trans people. People get unhappy with their gender assigned at birth because of various events in their life. It's a complicated intermingling of various causes and facts. And by saying that I'm born this way, it removes all responsibility on you to improve yourself or to change yourself. I was not equating trans people with sex offenders. I was saying that the excuse that I'm born this way just doesn't fly.
Mm. That makes sense to me. But are you when you say trans people don't exist, quoting Billboard Chris, you're not denying that there are people who feel that they're trans. You're saying that you don't believe that there are people who have a biological innate desire to be trans. Is that what you mean more precisely?
Yes, no one is born in the wrong body. You may feel unhappy with your body because of various events that happened in your life.
See, you're not denying the reality that there are people who identify as trans.
Oh, there are people, a lot of people that are very unhappy with their body. I sympathize with them, and I think there are various ways of solving that problem. Starting to medically alter your body, I don't think that will bring them lasting peace and happiness.
Okay. And last thing, the tribunal, they found that these 6 hate speech publications that you posted, they feel like it demonizes and delegitimizes trans people as a quote powerful menace threatening the security of children. Now, is that how you view trans people as a whole?
No, it's not the trans people, it's the people who are pushing this trans ideology. Some of them may be trans, but there are just as many so-called cisgender people that think this is a new frontier of human rights, and they're pushing this ideology, and it's not doing society any good. It's the idea that they're pushing that I think is evil, not the actual person.
So you're not angry at trans people, certainly not trans kids or gender dysphoric kids. You're angry at the people pushing these ideas.
I am. I'm angry at the ideas.
Right. People have conflated your anger with the ideology, with
Yeah,
hatred or animus towards the people,
yeah,
because they feel like you criticizing the ideology means that you're denying the existence of those
yeah.
people. You don't want to deny the existence or erase trans people from society, right, or anything like that.
I have only compassion for them,
Mm.
and I wish there was more effective ways of helping them feel. And I firmly believe in my cause, and people are starting to come around. People are saying much more outlandish things than I would ever dream of saying.
Yeah.
But back when I first spoke up, everybody was too timid to say anything. I will be silent when I finally kick the bucket, and that probably won't be too much longer from now. But
Hopefully not. Hopefully you got a lot of time with us.
but there's going to be a lot of people following after me that are going to have to pick up the ball and carry it from where I went. And hopefully I encourage them to speak out and speak what I believe is truth. And others may think that I'm deluded, that I'm wrong. Sorry, but I believe it's true.
Mm. And moving forward, can you just finish off by telling the audience about how your case is going to proceed?
Well, we have to file within 60 days of February 17th. We have to file an application for the court to review the decision. There were 3 weeks of hearings. We've got to hire a court reporter to type those all out, listen to the tapes and type them all out. And then this case is so long and complicated, a judicial review usually takes about a day, sometimes 2. This one is so long, there's going to be so many people involved, it'll probably be 3 days. We're looking for interveners to speak up on our side. There's a couple of organizations that have already come forward, and we're looking at some more. The BC Teachers Federation will probably have a dozen organizations intervening on their behalf.
Mhm.
And I'm happy to say that I've been in touch with a benefactor who may cover the whole cost of the judicial review.
Wait, does that include the fine? The
Not
$750?
fine.
Okay.
The fighting the charge. The court might side with the tribunal. The next step is appellate court, where you get 3 judges. Don't win there, then you go to the Supreme Court of Canada and have to face 9 judges.
And you're willing to do that?
Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking the $750K, like, how could you ever pay that off? Like, is there any rules, like you have to do weekly installments or monthly? Did they tell you anything like
Yeah.
that?
No. They know I can't pay for it. I live in a mobile home. I don't even own the property where I'm located. I drive a car that's worth $5,000. I got no money in the bank.
And we didn't go too much into this, but you, from what I've heard, you've worked with troubled kids a lot in your career, right? So you're coming at this from, you care about kids, you care about their development, you care about them growing up to live happy, free, well-functioning lives. And so you're coming at this with the interests of kids in mind, not with an agenda to hate trans people.
I don't. I want kids to be happy. I want them to be wholesome and healthy. I don't think rushing them towards chemicals and surgery is the way. It's easier to change their minds than to change their bodies. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my story.
Absolutely.
And because I've been wanting to share it with the other world, I'm not a hateful person. I'm just very, very critical of a learning resource that has come into our schools, and which I don't think, I think has many unintended consequences, and it's not in the best interest of our students.
I think you made a lot of fair, important points, but regardless of the content of speech, free speech is really important to protect, because if we get rid of free speech, suddenly we're no longer going to be able to openly express our views and beliefs, which is so important to have in a flourishing modern society. So I'm really concerned with the trajectory of the Canadian legal system and the human rights tribunals, and I'm glad you're still fighting the good fight, and you haven't gone crazy exactly, although some people would disagree.
Yeah.
But I hope you continue the fight, and I will definitely advocate for your ability to speak your mind and not be punished for it financially or in other ways. So I hope other people will support you as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for watching, everyone.